Chapter 10 Magic Sword. The road grew worse as Alex and his friends continued east. Grass and weeds grew over the path in several places, and there were no bridges over the streams they had to cross. Alex thought the road hadn't been ridden for over 100 years or more. The day was clear, and the sun grew hot as they traveled. It seemed the heat of summer would soon replace the pleasant warmth of spring in Vargland. Alex looked up at the clear sky, considering how far they still had to go. He had already traveled further on this adventure than he had ever gone in his life. They camped early that first night away from the White Tower, finding a sheltered place a short distance off the road. There was less laughter now than there had been, but they all remained in good spirits.
"We should keep a watch again," said Bregnest as they ate their evening meal. "These wilder lands have many dangers."
"That is true,"
Thrang said.
"though I doubt we'll find any trouble so close to the White Tower."
They agreed that keeping a watch would be a good idea, and Bregnest marked 8 stones and placed them in a bag for all members of the company to draw their watch as he had done before. Alex, with his normal luck, drew the stone marked for the first watch, which made him happy. As the others prepared for sleep, Archon remained by the fire with Alex. He asked Alex to bring out his books so they could continue their lessons. Alex was happy to do so since the book that Ainon had given him was turning out to be interesting, now that he could read parts of it. Archon also insisted he try to read from the magic book, even though it was much harder to understand, even with Archon's help. "The Book of Magic is written with letters similar to the Elfin," Archon explained, "though they are not exactly the same. You will need to learn both. Learning the one will help with the other." "Do the words mean the same thing in both books?" Alex questioned. "At times they do," said Archon as he considered the question. "But magic words are not elfin in nature. They are more difficult to speak and read, but also more powerful." "There's power in the words?" Alex asked. "All words have power, whether written or spoken," Archon replied with a soft laugh. "You know this already, as do all who can read or speak, but perhaps you have never thought of it that way before." "Words have power to communicate and tell us what things are," said Alex, thinking hard. "Yes, that," Archon agreed. "But words can do more than explain what things are. Words can give us knowledge and understanding. They can tell us of things as they once were, as they should be, or even as they might be." "And that is power?" questioned Alex. "Understanding and knowledge are the beginning of all power," answered Archon. "It is late, and your watch has passed. Go sleep. We will continue tomorrow." Alex left the fire and sat down on his blankets. He considered Archon's words about understanding and knowledge. He wondered what Archon meant by should be and might be. He didn't see how understanding what something might be could be magical. Archon's lessons were not nearly as simple as Thrang's Inferno and Quench commands had been. Alex's questions and the magic letters continued to bounce through his mind as he slowly fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Alex woke early, his thoughts about magic vanishing in the night, but Archon's lessons continued. As the company rode, Archon would occasionally ride to one side or the other and climb off his horse. When he caught up to the group again, he would stop next to Alex and Andy. He would hand a leaf or twig or a seed to Alex and ask him to identify it. Most of the items Alex recognized from studying Ainon's book. When Alex could not tell Archon what an item was and what it was used for, Archon would simply smile and place the item in a leather pouch that hung from his saddle. Alex knew Archon would bring these items out again when he had read more and could identify them. By the end of their third day away from the White Tower, the weather turned wet once more. Low clouds filled the sky, and the wind picked up from the west. The road led them more to the south, though their main direction remained east. "Summer rains are coming," said Tayo as they ate their dinner.
At least it's not cold,
Skeld replied with a laugh.
though wet is wet, no matter the temperature. Wind and rain are allies to bandits,
Bregnest commented thoughtfully, scanning the area around their camp. The hills they had been riding through were small and had spread out. The small meadows had grown into wide open fields with only a few clumps of trees and small hills between them.
We should stay alert,
Bregnest continued, returning his gaze to the company.
Alert and quiet.
Thrang added, glancing at Skeld. That night, Alex had a hard time reading as he sat beside the fire with Archon. His mind was occupied with thoughts of bandits and the trouble that could mean. Archon seemed strangely watchful as well, as if he were waiting for something. He would gaze into the darkness for long periods of time as Alex read aloud, seeming to pay no attention to what Alex was saying. "Are there really bandits this close to the White Tower?" Alex asked as he finished reading. "We are far from the tower now," replied Archon, his eyes fixed on the darkness. "Bandits have little respect for anything, even an oracle." "Will they try to kill us?" Alex questioned nervously. "Perhaps, though I think they would try to steal our horses first. A company on foot is easier prey." "Andy said bandits would attack first and steal our horses later," Alex commented, remembering Andy's words at the Troll's stream. "Andy has little experience with bandits, though at times they will attack first and steal later." Alex stood beside Archon and looked into the darkness, but he couldn't see anything at all. He listened as hard as he could, but all he heard was the wind moving through the nearby trees. "Perhaps we should build the fire up." "That would draw them like moths, if there are any about," said Archon. "Take your rest. Your watch has passed, and mine is just beginning." Alex did as Archon said, putting his books back inside his magic bag as he moved to the tent he and Andy shared. They had been sleeping under the stars, but with the threat of rain, they had set up their tents as a precaution. Alex looked back at his friend before entering the tent. Archon remained still and silent, gazing into the darkness. They followed the road for several more days, seeing no sign of anyone or anything as they went. Each night, Archon would teach Alex, who was learning quickly. Archon seemed happy and impressed with his progress. "Soon you will be able to read Elfin as well as any man, and better than many elves," said Archon with a smile as Alex put his books away. "You're a good teacher," Alex replied. Archon did not reply, his eyes turning suddenly from Alex to the darkness around the camp. Alex followed Archon's gaze, but he could see only darkness. "What is it?" Alex questioned softly. "Perhaps nothing," replied Archon, his gaze remaining on the darkness. "Perhaps something. I have felt for several days that we are being watched." "Should I wake the others?" "No," said Archon. "The danger is not close. Not yet." Alex felt nervous and tense as he lay down on his blankets. Anticipation filled his mind, and he found it difficult to sleep. He pulled his sword closer to him, letting his hand rest on the hilt. The cold metal seemed to ease his worries, and slowly he fell into a fitful sleep. A hand covered Alex's mouth, and he jerked awake, wanting to cry a warning to his friends. His hand gripped tightly around his sword.
Stay quiet,
Thrang's voice whispered.
Trouble's close. Pull on your boots and come outside. Quickly.
Alex could hear Andy moving in the darkness, but his eyes would not focus. He pulled on his boots and rubbed his eyes, trying hard to shake off sleep. Fastening Moonslayer to his belt, he followed Andy out of the tent. He could breathe better in the open air, but he was still having trouble seeing. Clouds filled the sky, hiding the moonlight, but he could make out the gray outlines of his companions standing near the cold fire pit. As quietly as he could, Alex moved toward them, his senses becoming sharper with each step. The wind had died down, allowing a strange silence to settle over the campsite. Alex could hear trees creaking softly in the light breeze, but what he focused on was the sound of horses in the distance, moving slowly from side to side.
They will come soon,
Whispered Thrang.
be ready.
Alex and his friends spread out, forming a line in front of their camp. Thrang was next to him on his right, Andy on his left. To Thrang's right stood Halfton and then Bregnest, but there was no sign of Tayo, Skeld, or Archon. Alex gripped his sword tightly, worried about his friends. "Where are the others?" Alex asked nervously, keeping his voice lowered.
Close.
Thrang replied, lifting his axe to a fighting position. Alex followed Thrang's example and drew Moonslayer from his side. The blade shimmered black in the darkness, a hint of blue running down the sharp edges. Alex felt a strange heat growing inside him as he held the sword and waited for battle. It was the same heat he had felt when he fought the troll, though he hadn't noticed it then. A powerful desire to rush into battle grew in his chest and mind, but he resisted it, thinking it was just his nerves. Suddenly, the sound of horses grew louder, moving fast, no longer shifting from side to side, but coming straight toward the camp. Alex felt his stomach tighten, knowing that any moment he would have to fight and kill if he wanted to stay alive. From out of the darkness, the dim outline of men on horses appeared, and Alex heard a terrible yell from the bandits as they charged. Alex and his friends raised their own battle cry when the bandits came into view. Alex saw some of the horsemen turn quickly to ride away, surprised to see an armed company ready to fight, but the rest charged forward wildly. Alex stood firm with his companions, afraid, but ready to meet the charging bandits and his fate. The noise of steel meeting steel filled the air around him, followed by the groans of wounded and dying men. Alex sidestepped a charging horse, swinging Moonslayer at the rider's body as hard as he could. He didn't think to strike a second time, but quickly looked for another enemy to fight. A strange madness filled his mind as he wielded his sword, a madness that drove him recklessly into the battle. To Alex, his movements felt natural but strangely alien as well. There was no time for him to think, even if he'd been able to focus his mind. He had to attack the bandits if he wanted to stay alive, and he did attack. Without hesitation, without thought, and without fear, Alex rushed into battle as a great happiness and a deep sorrow filled his heart and mind. The bandits quickly changed their minds about the attack and turned their horses to flee. They let out another scream as they tried to make their escape. Skeld, Tayo, and Archon were waiting for them, ready to attack them from behind. Again, there was the sound of steel on steel as more bandits fell from their horses. Alex rushed toward the remaining bandits he could see, slashing at them as they tried to break away. He felt a great heat inside his body as he attacked, swinging his sword wildly at everything on horseback. His movements were quicker now, and he could see his enemies clearly in the darkness, as if some strange light illuminated them. Running forward, Alex fought to stop the bandits from escaping, cutting down any who came near him. As quickly as it had begun, the battle was over. Alex spun around, wildly looking for more bandits, but there were none left. The heat inside him began to cool quickly, and as it cooled, darkness clouded his vision. "Are you all right, Alex?" asked Archon, standing at a distance. "Is the heat leaving you?" "Yes," replied Alex, suddenly feeling tired and weak. What happened to me? It is the sword, said Archon, stepping a little closer. Its power entered you, its master. Alex didn't reply, but looked down at the sword in his hand. The sword's edges gleamed bright blue, as if tiny flames raced up and down the blade. It looked beautiful in the darkness, and Alex felt a surge of fierce pride that Moonslayer was his sword. You didn't tell me this would happen, said Alex, his eyes turning to Archon. I mean, having the power of the sword enter me. I wasn't sure it would, replied Archon with a slight smile. I have heard stories, but I have never seen it happen. At least, not until tonight. We all saw it, said Andy, coming up beside Alex. It was amazing! If I hadn't seen it for myself, I'd never have believed it. What did you all see? Alex asked, fear growing inside of him.
A strange, pale light,
Bregnest replied softly, watching Alex closely, a look of wonder on his face.
like you were glowing. Not like a lamp, but like a beam of moonlight in the darkness.
Indeed he was,
said Thrang, looking from Alex to Bregnest.
I've heard stories too, but never thought I'd see something like this.
What does it mean? Alex asked in a troubled voice. The fire of a great warrior was lit inside of you this night, replied Archon. The sword has chosen its true master, and now we all know why the sword was named Moonslayer. But I'm not a great warrior, Alex protested.
Tell that to the bandits,
said Skeld with a grim laugh. Alex looked at the ground in surprise. Around him lay the bodies of the bandits he had killed. A spark of fear ran through him as he realized what he had done. Without thinking, he had rushed into the charging bandits and killed them. How many had he killed? He wasn't sure. What troubled Alex most was that now that the battle was over, he felt nothing toward the dead bandits. He had simply done what he had to do. There were no feelings of guilt or sorrow or even happiness. There was only the knowledge that he'd done what had to be done. He'd killed the enemy. The whole battle seemed like some half-forgotten dream. This can't be, said Alex, looking at his companions helplessly. It is, said Archon in a kindly voice. It is part of what you are. You cannot change what you are any more than you can change the sun or the sky. You can only accept it and learn to use your gifts wisely. Alex took a deep breath and let out a sigh. He knew Archon was right, and that the warrior inside him was a part of his true self. What now? Alex asked, wiping Moonslayer on the grass and returning it to his side.
We'll wait for daylight,
said Bregnest.
Then we'll search the bandits for anything of value.
Isn't that stealing? Alex asked with a weak smile.
They're dead,
Skeld laughed.
And they are bandits.
Alex knew the bandits would have killed them and stolen their things if they could have. He also knew from reading the Adventurer's Handbook that bandits fell into the same group of evil creatures as goblins and trolls. It wasn't stealing, but Alex didn't like the idea of searching the dead bodies. Thrang relit their campfire, and they gathered around the flames to wait for dawn. Thrang cooked breakfast, muttering to himself about Alex's moonlight glow. He seemed amused by the evening's events, even if Alex wasn't. When the eastern sky started to grow light, Skeld and Halfdan rode off in search of the bandits' horses. The darkness slowly changed to a dull gray as the sun came up behind the clouds. The air smelled like rain as Alex and his companions returned to the dead bandits. Alex wished it would rain and wash away the smell of death and the color of blood. He felt strange, going through the pockets of the dead bandits, but the others didn't seem to mind at all. They placed everything of value they found, including weapons, near their fire pit. Then they piled the dead bandits downwind from their camp.
Slim pickings.
Commented Thrang, tossing a bandit onto the pile.
Bandits never have much value.
Then why bother? Alex asked, struggling to drag a body to the pile himself.
You never know.
Replied Thrang, helping Alex toss the dead bandit onto the pile.
You might find something wonderful from time to time. Besides, every little bit helps to build the fortune.
Once they had piled the bodies, they gathered wood and put it on top of the stack. Thrang ignited the piled wood with his Inferno command, standing back to watch as the flames spread. Alex watched with Thrang as the fire consumed the dead men, and then he turned and walked back to the campfire. He tried not to think about the bandits burning a short distance away, but it was difficult not to. It was one thing to kill a troll and have it turn to stone, but this was something else.
Not much,
said Bregnest, separating a small pile of treasure into 8 smaller piles.
though the horses will bring a fair price in Tekken.
Tekken? Alex questioned.
A small city, 4 or 5 days' ride from here,
Bregnest answered.
I hadn't planned to stop there, but if we have horses to sell, it will be worth it.
And we might be able to get some information about Varlo and the lands around it,
Added Thrang. Varlo is the resting place of Slathbog, explained Archon before Alex could ask. It was an ancient city, and very rich, which is why the dragon came there, of course. How much do we know about Varlo? Alex asked.
Little more than what Archon has just said.
Thrang replied.
We do know there was a great castle, its foundation set deep in the mountainside.
And deep in the mountain is where the worm will be hidden, said Tayo in a grim tone. He's not likely to leave his hoard above ground. Alex knew almost nothing about dragons and what they would or would not be likely to do. The Adventurer's Handbook said little about dragons, and nothing about Slathbog. He wondered how much more his companions could tell him about dragons, certain he would need all the information he could get before facing Slathbog. Skeld and Halfton returned with a string of 20 horses. The horses looked well cared for, which surprised Alex. He thought they would be unhealthy and uncared for creatures, judging by what he'd seen of the bandits who had been riding them.
We found these easily enough,
said Skeld with his normal smile.
The others have run further than we cared to follow.
Anything in the saddlebags?
Questioned Thrang.
We haven't looked.
Halfton replied, glancing back at the horses.
Thought it best to come back with these than wait around for an arrow in the back.
You mean there are more bandits out there? Alex asked in a concerned tone.
If there are, they are few,
Bregnest replied.
And after last night's events, they'll stay well clear of us.
Skeld and Halfton dismounted and began taking the saddlebags off the captured horses. To Thrang's delight, the contents of the saddlebags more than tripled the amount of treasure they had to divide. Alex hesitated, thinking that the bandits were men after all, and not monsters.
Don't trouble yourself over them, said Tayo, watching Alex's face. Once a man becomes a bandit, he is no longer truly a man.
I don't understand, said Alex.
They become wild and cruel,
said Thrang, taking notice of the discussion.
Bandits don't care about nothing but stealing and killing. In most lands there's a bounty on them. They're nothing more than a plague to all people.
Alex nodded his understanding and took his share of the treasure, trying to forget his misgivings about the bandits being men.
We'll ride to Tekken,
said Bregnest as they prepared to depart.
If the rains hold off, we should make it in 4 days. And if the rains come, it will be 5 or 6,
Skeld replied.
And the horses won't look so good when we try to sell them. Then I expect you to take care of them,
answered Bregnest with a smile.
And if they don't fetch a fair price, you'll make up the difference to us all.
Skeld laughed loudly, and Alex wondered if anything ever dimmed his happy mood. Skeld's endless happiness made Alex's heart feel lighter, so he was glad that Skeld was with them. The rains held off for 2 days as the company rode toward Tekken, and they made good time both days. The morning of their third day, though, the rain started falling, building into a terrific downpour before midday. Alex and his friends moved slowly along the muddy and slick road. The rain continued as they stopped to camp for the night.
At least we can eat without getting any wetter,
Skeld laughed, shaking his head like a dog. The company's mood had darkened slightly because they were all soaked to the skin and unhappy about it. The muddy road had slowed their progress as well, and Bregness said he thought it would be at least 2 more days before they reached Tekken.
Remember, when we reach Tekken, we are trading horses. Nobody is to speak of our goal to anyone, warned Bregnest. I will make a few inquiries about Varlo and see if there is anything I can learn.
The company agreed with Bregnest's plan, though Alex thought 8 adventurers turning up and trading bandit ponies was sure to attract interest from the people of Tekken. If anyone knew anything about Varlo, they would quickly suspect that Alex and his friends were headed there. Perhaps they will, agreed Archon when Alex spoke his mind that night during his watch. But many adventurers come and go on different quests, and most ask about Varlo. If they're on a different quest, why do they ask? Alex questioned.
For future reference, replied Archon. Every adventurer dreams of one day seeking a dragon's hoard, as this is one of the richest quests an adventurer can go on. So, many will ask, but few will ever attempt the challenge.
Is it really that dangerous? Alex asked.
It won't be easy, answered Archon, though nothing of importance ever is. Bregnest is following a dream of his own, and a prophecy. Both will help us, I think.
Prophecy?
Yes, but it is not mine to speak of, said Archon. We will discuss what I know of dragons tomorrow night during your watch. Though I know little enough, I may know as much as any other.
May I ask you something else? Alex questioned.
You should rest. Your watch has passed, said Archon.
It's about my sword, said Alex. About the feelings I had when we were fighting the bandits.
Ah, I wondered how the sword might affect you, said Archon. Many emotions are bound to the magic of your sword. Tell me, what did you feel?
It is hard to explain, but while I was using the sword, I felt almost like laughing out loud and crying at the same time.
And after the battle?
I didn't really feel anything after. I just knew that I'd done what was needed. I didn't feel happy or sad or anything.
Archon looked into the darkness beyond the fire. The elves who made your sword took great joy and pride in their work, yet they also had great sorrow because they were forced to create weapons of destruction. The magic they put into your sword holds both their joy and their sorrow. So when the magic enters you,
I feel their emotions as well, said Alex.
Yes, I would guess the joy was greater as the sword was being used to destroy evil. Still, it is a terrible kind of joy, one tempered by much sorrow.
Yes, said Alex. It was a terrible joy.
Do not be troubled, Alex, Archon went on. The emotions will always be there, but I think, in time, they will not trouble you so much.
Thank you for telling me what you know, said Alex, bowing to Archon and then making his way to his tent. The next morning dawned bright and clear. The clouds had drifted away during the night, and the sun came out to dry the waterlogged land. They made good progress that day, but as night crept across the land, there was still no sign of Tekken. That night during his watch, Archon told Alex all he knew about dragons,
which was more than Alex would have guessed. "Forgive me for saying so, but you seem to have great respect for dragons," said Alex as Archon finished speaking. "Indeed I do," said Archon with a slight smile. "They are powerful and magical creatures. Some of them are very noble. It is said in some lands they are friendly to other races. Still, they are all dragons at heart."
"What does that mean?" Alex asked.
"As with all people, they are what they are," replied Archon, shrugging. "They have their own nature, and that is to be a dragon. Most dragons are considered evil because they lust for treasure and never seem to have enough. Some, however, have overcome that lust, or perhaps never had it. Those few dragons are very wise." Archon's voice dropped to a whisper. "One last thing you should know about dragons. Never look a dragon in the eye unless you are sure you are stronger than it is."
"Why?" Alex asked, wondering if anyone could really be stronger than a dragon.
"Dragons are magical. They have powers of their own that only they understand. If you look them in the eye, they can capture you in a spell."
"Can the spell be broken?"
"It is said that once the dragon looks away, the spell will be broken," replied Archon, "though I've never heard of anyone escaping a dragon once he had gazed into the dragon's eyes."
Alex considered everything Archon had told him about dragons. He wondered what might be seen in a dragon's eyes, and if it would be worth the risk of looking. That night, Alex dreamed about dragons and the mysteries hidden behind their eyes. He dreamed that he could look into a dragon's eyes without fear. But before he could look, it was morning and time to ride on.